All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Elections Weekly. I'm your host, Eric Cunningham. We've got a smaller panel this week, just me, Joe, and Dylan here. Kraz is not able to make it. He had an important event he had to attend. And so we did not have him here tonight, but we have a good show for you regardless. We're going to go ahead and start. We'll probably be a little bit thinner this week, not go too long over the 45 minutes for you guys, but we'll go ahead and start with Maryland. Maryland election primaries were on Tuesday. We don't have all of the numbers in, but we do have pretty much everything from the key races we were following. If you were watching our election stream, you knew there were some surprises on Tuesday, some stuff we didn't expect to happen, some stuff happened we expected to happen, and some pretty bad things overall for the Republican Party in Maryland. So we'll go ahead and, I guess, start. So give us a brief little rundown. We were following on those. We were following the big ones. We were following Maryland 2nd congressional primary on the Republican side, Maryland governor on both sides. There was a congressional race in the D.C. area, Donna Edwards and Glenn Ivey. And then there was another race which we were not paying attention to, but we should have, which is the Republican Attorney General primary. So let's go into all of these. So start with the one you think is the most interesting to go over.
We'll start with the easy one, and that's the 6th Congressional District primary for the Republicans. Obviously, we talked about this in pretty widespread on Tuesday night, and of course, the 6th District, due to the forced redrawing of the original planned congressional map, made the 6th District go from about a Biden plus 25 seat to around only a Biden plus 10, and only a seat that voted for Hillary Clinton by about a point. Certainly competitive in this environment. The GOP primary here was based between 2020 nominee Neil Parrott and journalist Matthew Foldy, or so we thought going tonight. I did think that Parrott was going to win going tonight. I did not think would be by as much as he did. Parrott almost won by nearly 50 points. He won 64 to 15 over Foldy, a margin of 22,400 votes over Foldy on the night. It was a surprise in some ways. Foldy did raise like a pretty good chunk of change in his time in the race. He raised around $225,000 in the race. It's not like he didn't have any money at all. He was at least we thought, and at least knocking a lot of doors. Obviously, though, it wasn't enough to beat the name brand that is Parrott. I think I've seen people online calling Parrott a no-name delegate. I think that's kind of unfair. He's been in the state house for a long time in Maryland, and he's also someone who was pretty heavily at the forefront of pushing against the gerrymandered Western District. He's someone who's been pretty heavily at the forefront of that. So I think it's unfair to call him a no-name, but it's certainly a surprise that he beat Foldy like he did, especially in Frederick and Montgomery counties, portions of the district where it's a little bit more suburban. We thought those demographics might favor Foldy a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing I want to mention here, though, is that obviously there's been some comparisons drawn to a lot of other primaries this cycle where you have a highly online candidate who's, being promoted in the right circles. And, usually on the Democratic side, usually it's a progressive challenger to a no-name or backbencher Democrat that no one really cares about or cares to remove. This one's different because Foldy had a ton of endorsements, too. He basically had endorsements from Donald Trump Jr., Larry Hogan, pretty much everyone in between. He was being endorsed by a lot of very credible national figures and some in Maryland as well. This is why we thought he had a pretty reasonable chance. Everything was tracking, despite no public polling being in this race, for a reasonably competitive contest. What was clear is that the endorsements did not really matter too much here, and that Parrott did, had that strong name ID and strong base in the district. We are keeping this race that leans Democratic, of course. I don't think we would have moved it with either of the nominees in all likelihood. We do think this could be a competitive seat, but right now we do have it at leans Democratic still. This is the best news Republicans got out of this night in Maryland. What is some of the worst news they got?
I had a quick comment on this. I think between this and the Maryland gubernatorial primary on the Republican side, I think this is a pretty bad showing for Larry Hogan's presidential ambitions.
Yes.
Both of his major endorsements failed. And not only failed pretty hard. I forget the name of the woman he endorsed for governor.
Well, Kelly Schultz.
We'll get right to that.
Yeah,
for sure here. But I do want to talk about the other, the key Democratic primary to congressional seat, the open 4th district, the seat that Anthony Brown left. to run for Attorney General, which he did win that primary on Tuesday night. Glenn Ivey, so it's only about, according to the Times, only about 68% of the vote reported in right now. Again, Maryland did not allow themselves to count because of state law. Could not count mail-in ballots until Thursday, and they are counting through these ballots very, very, very slowly. So what you've got here, though, Decision Desk and other sites, however, have called the race for Ivey. Really, the mail-ins, while doing better for Edwards, have not come in at a rate where it would be enough to overtake Ivey's lead. Ivey was considered the more moderate of the two candidates. Edwards obviously attempting a comeback in the seat that was closest to what she had left it to Brown. She retired in 2016 to run against Chris Van Hollen in that race to replace Barbara Mikulski in the United States Senate. She lost the primary to Van Hollen. She also recently lost a race for, I believe it was an executive position in Prince George's County, I believe, that she lost in 2018, and now she's lost this primary to Ivey in 2022. Probably puts a fork in her political career. Of course, we can't talk about this race, of course, without the heavy money coming in from Ivey from AIPAC. Again, another success for their attempts. They're meddling in primaries on the Democratic side here. Other than Summer Lee, they've basically taken out anyone else who they've targeted their money against. Certainly a win there for them in terms of how they're spending their money. But this is one of the safest blue seats in the country. Not only is it pretty heavily African American, but it is also a very wealthy area, very well educated area in those DC suburbs. One of the safest of the safety seats. Glenn Ivey will be coming to Congress this November.
Yeah, I think if the presidential election last year was kind of a knock against the idea that money is the most significant factor in winning an election, I think these Democratic primaries have given a lot of boosting to that idea. The candidate who raised the most money, I believe, has won every election this cycle except two. Summer Lee was outspent in Pennsylvania 12, and Danny Davis was outspent in Illinois 7. Every other Democratic primary, I believe, the candidate who's raised the most money has won. And when AIPAC is willing to spend $5-6 million in a single race, well, that's going to be hard to overcome unless you're independently wealthy or have a crypto billionaire backing you. So, yeah, I'm not at all surprised.
Yeah. So moving on then to the statewide races, obviously disaster for Republicans everywhere else. Dan Cox, the very right-wing election denying delegate from the western part of the state, beating former Hogan endorsed and former Hogan Labor Secretary Kelly Schultz in the gubernatorial race. Again, not all the votes have been counted yet, but again, it's a pretty clear Cox victory at this point. At the moment, he's winning by just under 13 points. This might be a race that gets down to 12, maybe 11.5 points, depending on how those mail-in ballots break from these areas. These are for more populated suburban and city areas. We expect mail-in ballots from these places to lean significantly heavier towards Schultz. But anyway, it's not nearly enough, especially with almost 90% of the vote counted. Schultz has so far only won 3 places. Howard County, Kent County, and Baltimore City proper. She is close in some areas. I don't think she'll overtake Cox in the other areas, it looks like. But, however, pretty damning result there for Maryland Republicans. And also the Attorney General's primary. This wasn't something we were paying attention to anyways, but Maryland Republicans nominated an absolute nut job. I think that's probably the best way you could put it there, quite honestly. They nominated a guy by the name of, he was going to go up against Anthony Brown, by the way, of course, who beat Katie O'Malley in the primary for that Democratic primary on Tuesday night. It was one of the closest Democratic primaries, actually.
Of course it was, because Anthony Brown is awful.
But Michael Perutka was the Republican nominee, and he is a well and true shown nutcase. He's a guy. I think Eric can go through a bit more of this here because I know he's seen some of the stuff he said. But he was a former Constitution Party presidential nominee. Mm-hmm. He said some stuff, I believe, about abortion and like the church and the state. That is, I think, even
isn't
concerning.
He also a racist?
I think he might have said. Yeah, Eric can go into
he is one of those. He is one of those weird Marylanders that culturally affiliates very closely with the South, to the extent that he is a member of the League of the South. If you're not familiar with the League of the South,
that's right.
Yes, it's an organization which basically is a secessionist organization, a white nationalist neo-Confederate group that wants to create an independent Southern Republic. You can wonder why they want to do that, and what positions they hold on the Civil War. You can wonder that internally, or you can just look them up and realize they're absolute freaking nut job neo-Confederates.
Can I just say that having that position in Maryland would be like having that position in Canada?
You think that's weird, but I swear, there are people in Maryland. I know. There are these weird Southern culture affiliating Marylanders. We don't claim Maryland as part of the South, by the way. I'm actually from a Southern state, North Carolina. We don't claim them. They're their own thing. They're never part of any of this stuff. You don't need to claim that. But so he's part of that, among other things. He has, at one point, he told a crowd to stand for the national anthem and then play Dixie, which probably goes about as great as doing it.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. Yeah.
Can't be doing that.
Yeah, he was the largest donor to Roy Moore's Supreme Court campaign in 2012.
Senate campaign.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Wait. Hold on. I'm sorry. I'm confused. Roy Moore, Alabama Supreme Court?
Yeah, Supreme Court in 2012. When that was when Roy Moore almost lost a statewide race in Alabama as a Republican for the first time.
Again?
Yeah. Going even further, he left the Constitution Party, or he favored removing a party from the Constitution Party because they supported some limits on abortion for rape and incest exceptions. He opposes the government funding of education. He got elected to office somehow in Anne Arundel County in 2014, and then he lost in 2018. This guy's an absolute whack job. To put it lightly, he's probably the worst statewide nominee Republicans are going to put forth in any state this cycle. That includes beating worse than Joanne Perkins. This guy is just an absolute nut job. This is bad news. Again, the League of the South, they are like actual neo-Confederates who believe, I'm not even sure they have any issues with slavery as a concept. Like, these guys they go even beyond like the Sons of Confederate Veterans or the United Daughters of the Confederacy. Those groups generally just focus on like monuments and just, the lost cause stuff. These guys are trying to recreate the Confederacy. Like, that's pretty damning. And he was part of it. He left in like 2016 or so, 2014, before we ran for Anne Arundel County Commission. Now he's back, and he's going to lose to Anthony Brown by a gigantic margin because he is a lunatic even by Maryland's Republican standards.
You know what? Good for Anthony Brown. He gets to run against the best Republican and the worst.
Mm-hmm.
Good for him.
Within the span of 10 years. 10 years or so.
Good for Anthony Brown. Yeah, that guy sounds like a whack job. I did not know there were. I knew there were people who culturally identified as Southerners in Maryland.
They're usually yeah.
I guess it should have tracked then that there would be neo-Confederates in Southern Maryland.
They're usually on the Eastern Shore. That's on the closer to the Delaware side of the Maryland border. That's where they usually are. I know there's some Confederate monuments out there.
That makes even less sense.
Well, the DC section, obviously not Baltimore, definitely not. Yeah. Although Union Dixie has Baltimore in the song. The Delmarva Peninsula, Virginia has a portion of that peninsula. Delaware had slaves. Maryland had slaves. Basically, that portion of Maryland is the closest thing to Southernish there is in Maryland. That's where they all hang out at. Then there are Confederate monuments out there, which is just wacky.
Yeah, that's not great. That's pretty bad.
Yeah, it's awful. It's. I mean, even the Southern states don't generally nominate, neo-Confederates to anything, except Maryland, apparently.
Or if they do, the neo-Confederates the South nominates are at least smart enough not to say, "Hi, I'm a neo-Confederate."
Yep. Oh, actually, they did just remove a Confederate monument in Talbot County last year.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, that in Talbot County, I'm pretty sure that's in the Eastern Shore area.
I can't believe we're still having this discussion about monuments. This is over.
You would think
it's been over
like
for
Michael
like 200 years.
To people like Michael Perotka, it is not over. Reminder: Bionicle lasted longer than the Confederacy. Lasted twice as long as the Confederacy, in fact.
I watched. I have heard more about Bionicle from you than I did when I actually saw the toys in the TV show.
But let's get back on track and go through some of the more Maryland stuff. I think we've had our fun with Perotka. Do we have anything else to go over in Maryland? I know we talked about Dan Cox a little bit.
Well, we have the Democratic governor's primary, of course.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I want to preface it by saying that neither DDHQ nor the AP, which is the New York Times source, has called this race yet, but other sites have, including NBC and CBS, have called the race for Wes Moore. Certainly tracking this way. It seems that the AP and DDHQ are waiting for the next draw from Montgomery County. Both have it only around 55% of their votes tallied. Tom Perez, who's in second place, has been, again, probably not by enough, but has been gaining with the mail-in ballots, has had a massive lead in Montgomery County. He's pulled about 45% of the vote there right now. So I think they're probably waiting to see what that next drop brings. I should say that Perez has knocked down Moore's margin a little bit. Moore was hovering around 36% of the vote on after election night proper. He's down to around 34.5 at this point.
That's not bad. Not enough, but
it's not going to be enough. But mainly because Moore basically dominated the central part of the state for the most part. He so far had almost 50% of the vote in Prince George's County, and Moore, I think, even more crucially, he won both. He is winning both Baltimore and Baltimore County by double digits, really being that's a crucial element there. Baltimore County were closer, mainly for Tom Perez. Then this race would be looking like it's heading towards a Perez victory through the mail-in ballots, rather than the Moore victory. That seems, again, pretty likely, but we're holding off on an official call here yet from DDHQ and the New York Times, who are the real two that we look at here when it comes to making our projections. Peter Franchot, also the current comptroller, dominated in the rural areas. He won nearly all of the Eastern Shore. He won those three. He is so far winning, such as one those three more West Virginia counties we talked about: Garrett, Allegheny, and Washington. Pretty strong argument that if Franchot maybe had dropped out or maybe wasn't in here, that Tom Perez would probably be the nominee right now over Wes Moore. But that's something for another. That's a scenario for another time. It'll be very interesting to kind of see more with Cox. Dan Cox in the nominee. Basically has a clear shot to the gubernatorial mansion at this point. If Schultz was the nominee, there would be some things to hit back at for Moore. He seems to have weirdly lied about some things from his background and his history. He weirdly did not correct an interview where he said he was a Bronze Star holder. He does not have a Bronze Star. And also someone said he was a member of the Maryland Football Hall of Fame, which does not exist. So interesting. There are some interesting things with the background of Moore that could be attacked on.
Those are Eric Adams type of lies.
Yeah,
they could have been attacked by a credible Republican candidate, perhaps, but we don't have a credible Republican candidate. We have Dan Cox.
That was the growing point there, was that obviously with Cox the nominee, there's just so much there that would be disliked in the state of Maryland that obviously it wouldn't really bring a thing here for them.
No.
Yeah, and despite what the online populist will tell you, Dan Cox is going to win by at least 30. That's probably the floor. This could easily be. I mean, he is a very, very bad candidate.
Eric, can I just say your disdain for the populists always brings a smile to my face.
Here.
Yeah.
Hooray for the editor-in-chief.
Yeah. You had 8 years of Larry Hogan being governor, and I get some of the stuff. You can only do so much with a gerrymandered Democratic majority that would be a Democratic supermajority anyway, even without a gerrymander. Like, there's only so much you can do in Maryland. But, like, if they didn't like Larry Hogan, they're really not going to like Wes Moore. That's all I can tell them. I mean, this is the second time we've seen a GOP basically self-immolate this year after the Massachusetts Republican Party, which even they have a choice between a more reasonable candidate and Jeff Deal. And we'll see how they go, the 5 Republicans in Maryland or in Massachusetts, how they vote in the primary. But it's some of these states are just making inexplicably bad decisions. And I know some of it comes down to Kelly Schultz. I saw a lot of Republicans online saying she ran a very bad campaign. Quite possibly very true. But also this is partly on voters who just made a bad decision. I mean, he's not going to win. I mean, if you're a political party and you're not in it to win, don't know what you're in it for.
Yeah, but I mean, this also, I think, speaks to, like I was saying earlier about Larry Hogan, I think this speaks to a lack of influence that he holds. And I think this should be a wake-up call for him in terms of any national political ambitions.
I mean, his biggest wins have been basically getting rid of the red line, which was a lot of suburban Marylanders did not want to happen. They wanted that money to be redirected to the suburbs, which it was. Baltimore voters hated it. Pretty much most of the other suburbans wanted it. But like in terms of stuff, like a bunch of stuff rural voters really cared about, Hogan didn't do too much about those. He did fix the congressional maps somewhat. Even that's not a total victory because Carroll County could easily been added to the 6th district, making it a Republican seat instead of a Democratic one. He opted for the compromise proposal instead of taking the risk of going to statewide court again over the new Democratic proposal. I mean, I've seen people saying you got to give your base some red meat at a point, but again, it's Maryland. You don't. Yeah. The legislature has a supermajority against you. Like, what are you supposed to do?
And who's your base to give red meat to?
30% of the electorate, 30 to 35% of the electorate, apparently.
If you only feed 35% of the electorate, that's not a winning strategy.
It's not. It's really not. But, apparently that's what you got to do to win a Republican primary in Maryland these days. So, we'll see how it is in another 4 years. But we're not expecting great things out of the Republican Party in Maryland this year, to put it lightly. A bit of not just a swing and a miss. This is like I'm not even sure what the appropriate analogy is. Like intentionally wrecking your car in a NASCAR race, about the closest thing I can compare this to. It's a total train wreck.
I guess that's fair.
Yeah. But what do we want to go to next? I know we considered talking about one thing, but do you want to just go straight to the Tuesday primaries, or not Tuesday, the August 2nd primaries?
To the August 2nd primaries.
Yes.
Yep. All right. So we got a bunch of states coming up on August 2nd. This is going to be probably the biggest live stream for the rest of the year until election night. We got a lot of those primaries coming up. I know Joe is paying attention to, but August 2nd is the big one. August 2nd has just so many big states. It's got, I think, Ohio and New York has specific primaries on them. It's got Arizona, Kansas, Michigan, Missouri, and Washington. That's a pretty big swing. We're focusing on a ballot initiative in Kansas. We've a lot of races in Arizona, obviously. Michigan, figure out what goes on there. Missouri and Washington. All of these states have really interesting primaries. So do you want to just go alphabetical order, or do we have a state we want to go over first?
I think we got it's the first state in alphabetical order, but I think you can't miss this without talking about Arizona.
So Arizona, what are we focusing on in Arizona?
There's a whole lot you can focus on in Arizona. There's a lot of open races. There's a lot of open areas for this. Obviously, the primaries for senator on the Republican and governor on the Republican side, key ones to watch, but also primaries on both sides, I believe, for Attorney General and Secretary of State are going to be key to watch as well. You have key congressional primaries on the Republican side. I'm talking about the new 1st district. The first district, David Schweikart is facing a well-funded primary challenge in the 2nd district in I believe what is now a Trump plus 9 seat to go up against Democrat Tom O'Halloran. There's a key Republican primary there in the 6th district. Primaries on both sides. This new Tucson suburbs-based seat to replace the retiring Ann Kirkpatrick. Yeah, it's gonna be a good time. Going to be a good time in Arizona. We'll see if the Republican Party there decides to go full on risky, or if they may pick some safer nominees.
Yeah. Well, to be clear, it's not so much risky as it is in a similar way to Maryland setting themselves on fire. The difference is these candidates could actually potentially win in Maryland or in Arizona. Specifically the gubernatorial primary, we're paying attention to that one pretty heavily. All the Republicans except for the top 2, Carrie Lake and Karen Taylor Robinson, I believe that's her name, have dropped out. This is basically setting up a one-on-one contest between the two. Carrie Lake obviously is the Trump-endorsed candidate here. She's basically run a one-issue campaign on election denial. Her opponent is basically attacking her from the right on a lot of issues, on a lot of culture war issues specifically. More recently, she's been targeted the whole campaign for having donated to Obama in 2008. In recent months, she's been attacked for, in particular, her hypocrisy on drag queens, oddly enough. She's made drag queen opposition a big part of her campaign, particular opposition to drag queen story times, drag queens in schools. But it turns out she's actually hired drag queens to perform at events for her, including like birthday parties at her house. So there's been some stuff on that.
That's the dumbest cultural wedge issue I've ever heard
of. The Kari Lake team is aggressively online. They're aggressively online. Polls still show her in the lead, but out of these, this is probably the only time Republicans have actually consolidated against the pro-Trump candidate here. This would be a win for the Kelly Ward wing of the party if Kari Lake wins, and there's a chance she could win the gubernatorial race. I don't think we're moving it off of toss-up if she wins. The Democratic field isn't extremely impressive in their own right. This is easily state Republicans could still potentially win even with Lake. This is purely a candidate quality issue. The Senate campaign, on the other hand, that's more of a problem. It's a three-way race pretty much at this point between the Attorney General, Mark Brnovich, Jim Lamon, who is a businessman, and Blake Masters, who is a Peter Thiel-funded crypto bro who is running a weird campaign focusing on a lot of things that a lot of people don't pay attention to, but he has that crucial Trump endorsement. I know we've talked quite a bit extensively in other podcasts about Blake Masters' many, many, many candidate flaws. Among them, not raising a lot of money would be a big one, but also, potentially praising the Unabomber, calling for the privatization of Social Security, saying that black gun violence in cities is caused by black people, and also past writings advocating for complete uncontrolled immigration into the United States. Basically, seems tailor-made to irritate everyone. This one, they've not consolidated. Jim Lamon is kind of gaining in the polls. He's donated a lot of money to himself. Mark Brnovich has run a really lackluster campaign, has not raised a lot of money. In some polls, has slipped into third. Blake Masters has kind of solidified himself in first place, but it's not an insurmountable lead unless you're like relying on the Rich Barris tier pollsters, and you shouldn't. We don't know who's going to win this. I think we all expect Masters to win, but I don't know the margin. It's certainly more possible that this would probably. I would expect the margin to be closer than somewhere like Ohio, where there was not that. There's only 3 candidates here as opposed to like 5 candidates in Ohio.
You see, I expect, the margin will be a little closer, but I expect the difference between first, second, and third. Because I think there are a few candidates outside of the top 3. I do expect Brnovich, Lamon, and Masters to all be pretty close. Mm-hmm. I don't expect anyone to win by a wide margin.
Yeah. And again, we have this race as a toss-up. I don't expect we'd flip it immediately if Masters is the nominee, but we would be surprised if Masters could win a general election in Arizona. It's a very, very bad year for Democrats looking like, but if there's someone who could lose a statewide election, Blake Masters fits the sort of candidate who has lost these statewide elections in the past in these sorts of wave years.
I think you're really bearish on him. I think Masters' candidate quality is second to the environment. And I think Masters is bad, but I don't know that he's overcoming an R+5 environment bad.
Well, you can overcome candidate quality to some degree with a degree of effective campaigning, personality and charisma, none of which we would accuse the Masters campaign of possessing those things. That's, I think, the biggest problem is that Masters as a candidate is the sort of person who could win a House race maybe somewhere. As a Senate figure, he's aggressively uncharismatic. He's aggressively boring. He's faced accusations of carpetbagging from California in particular. It's just, again, I don't know if the difference between him and Brnovich or Lamon would be massive in a general election. But going up against Mark Kelly, you want someone who can at least raise money. You want someone who can, effectively campaign, point out issues, not be on the defensive the entire campaign. You probably don't want someone who's called for the overturning of Griswold versus Connecticut. So again, in Arizona, I just think he has a lot of flaws that are very, very specific to Arizona that could particularly hurt him.
Man, Democrats are not good at campaigning, but you guys pick some weird cultural wedge issues.
Which one in particular do you think the Masters campaign is focusing on that's really strange? The Unabomber thing?
Well, okay. So in the Senate campaign, I think the Griswold, Connecticut thing is incredibly strange. The Unabomber thing is weird, but at least he's not featuring that. The drag queen issue in the gubernatorial primary is mind-boggling.
it's not so much it's not so much the drag queen issue. It's that for some reason Kari Lake made this a part of her campaign, and it's very, very apparent she's actually personal friends with like several drag queens.
I hope I speak for everyone when I scream from the rooftops, who cares?
This is a good question.
Who cares?
There are ads going out on this issue.
Many ads. I
don't
ads, you know?
I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it. But God, who cares? Let the drag queens be drag queens. Who cares?
Yep. It's that, I mean, when her campaign is very strange. Again, Kari Lake, but I think populists really, really like Kari Lake. It's kind of baffling. She has a very thin record.
It's not baffling at all. The populists like who Trump endorses.
Sometimes they do not like who he endorses, and other times, like for example, Katie Boyd Britt in Alabama, they really didn't like him. I know a lot of populist people who are really on board for Mark Walker. They weren't huge fans of Ted Budd. They wanted someone more like Mark Walker in the seat. Usually the Trump endorsement is a big deal. Here, it's really certainly helped Kari Lake. The immediate endorsement, I think, clearly positioned herself very well early on. If there's a candidate who can beat her, it would probably be Karen Taylor Robinson. But again, we'll see.
And don't forget,
there's plenty of time.
Don't forget, Kari Lake is getting boosted by the Arizona Democratic Party.
Yes, again, they're the Democratic Party again intervening in the Republican parties. This time in the state, they could definitely lose this one.
Yeah, like we said last, I think on Tuesday, I'm not convinced that this is effective, but it's a bad look. Yeah.
Pennsylvania was one thing, because I think there was a general perception that there was no way Mastriano could win. I think that was what Democrats truly and deeply thought, is that if Mastriano was the nominee, Republicans would just revolt. The suburbanites would revolt. There would just be no one want to vote for him. They did not expect Mastriano to be down 3 to 5 points in the polls. They expected it to be double digits. Arizona, that's a really bad state to do that in, because this is easily, again, a state, a replacement level Republican could easily flip the seat, could hold this gubernatorial contest. Democrats have had pretty bad gubernatorial nominees here since Janet Napolitano, last one in 2006. I mean, again, this is like you've had Jan Brewer since then. If Arizona could handle Jan Brewer, they could probably handle Kari Lake. They're in the same ballpark of ridiculousness in a lot of ways. I think this is just a particularly bad state to do it in. Yeah, I think this is a particularly bad state to do this in. This isn't a Colorado or where it's out of reach. This isn't a Maryland where it's out of reach if Dan Cox is the nominee. This is Arizona. This is a state Biden won by like a fraction of a percent.
Yeah. Like, again, I don't know that it's effective. I do know you shouldn't be doing it because it's not a good look.
Yeah. And I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how effective it is. I don't know if there's any impact in Arizona in particular. I think people have their minds already set before Democrats started running ads like this. And, these ads here are actually particularly targeting Karen Taylor Robinson. They are going after the more electable Republican here. They're not even specifically boosting Lake so much as they're like going after the candidate going against Lake.
Yeah, I would be curious after all of these elections are done if somebody could do an analysis of Pennsylvania, Arizona, Colorado, see how effective these ads were. I'd be really curious to read that.
I have a feeling that outside of Pennsylvania, the impact is very minimal. Clearly, in Colorado, it didn't do a whole lot. Maryland, I think that was the thing even before the Trump before they started spending money. He already had the Trump endorsement. Schultz was not running a good campaign. I think that's less debatable there. I don't know. I think this is a bad thing, though. I don't think you should be propping up candidates that are opposing democracy, especially in states you can definitely lose. Like, does anyone want Kari Lake to be governor in 2024? If Democrats win Arizona? I certainly don't. I mean, just a big ice there.
I don't want Lake or Mastriano. That just seems bad.
But out of them, would you prefer in 2024 to have someone who did not say the election was stolen, or someone who's full stop the steal, audit everything, decertify?
Well, Doug Mastriano did go to the January 6th.
Fair enough.
Rally. So I mean,
yeah,
I think he's made his position clear on the matter.
Yeah, and we could talk about Arizona for a while longer, but I think we should continue moving on because we got a bunch of other states. Next up on the list is Kansas. There are not a lot of competitive races in Kansas aside from the gubernatorial races, but I think both parties have their candidates there already set.
It'll be Derek Schmidt versus Laura Kelly. There's nothing to watch there.
Yeah, there's a competitive attorney general primary in Kansas. Again, that's not going to probably matter too much in November. What we are paying attention to is the referendum, which is being termed the Value Them Both referendum. I'm calling it that because that's what it's actually being debated and called as. It's listed on the ballot in particular. This is basically an amendment that would strike down what the Kansas Supreme Court declared to be a constitutional right to abortion in Kansas. This would allow the legislature in Kansas to pass new abortion regulations, but it would not impose any abortion regulations in and of itself. It basically just gets rid of that Supreme Court ruling. That distinction is what the advocates for this amendment are calling for. The people who are opposing this amendment are specifically targeting and saying, if you pass this, there will be additional abortion restrictions. They're trying to neuter that as an issue. There's a recent poll indicated that did show, Well, there was a recent poll coming up that showed that the amendment is up in Kansas. I think it was up by about 3 or 5 points.
About 3. It was 47-44.
Yeah, 47-44. Could easily go either way. In Kansas, again, both sides are doing interesting arguments. The Value Them Both side are arguing that this amendment will do abortion, but they're also arguing that they're going to be focusing on other things like parental care and other. That's why it's called Value Them Both. They're trying and imply that they will be doing more family-focused things. This isn't the only thing they're doing. So they're trying to argue they'll be expanding the welfare capacity in that area eventually. The Democratic side, or the pro-choice side here, generally Democrats are arguing it purely on individual liberty grounds. They're running a very individual liberty-focused campaign. If you pass this, you'll restrict individual liberty. We'll be interested to see how this goes. There could be some ticket splitting here, especially in those ancestrally Republican areas like Johnson County. We could expect to run a little bit ahead of Biden's performance, possibly. Kansas City, Topeka, Lawrence, all these cities we would expect to be doing probably better than Biden's performance in those areas. I would at least think. But again, that's the one. Yeah. That's the one race we're paying attention to in Kansas. There's nothing really else aside from the attorney general primary there that's really interesting to focus on there. Yeah. What is interesting, though? Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I just want to say I do think that Democratic messaging in that amendment election is really interesting and a good test case for how you might be able to campaign on that issue.
It's very Kyrsten Sinema-ish, like when she was leading the focus against the Arizona.
Kirsten Sinema is an American politician.
Sorry, Siri. Siri appears to have decided to define who Kyrsten Sinema is for me. Thank you for that. But no, when Kyrsten Sinema was in the Arizona legislature, she led the campaign against an amendment that would have banned gay marriage in Arizona. And the specific focus was not that it would ban gay marriage, but that it would ban all domestic partnerships of any kind outside of marriage. That's why that amendment failed. She led a very, very effective campaign. This reminds me of that focus right there. That's why I say it's very Sinema-ish.
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting style. Focusing on individual liberty is, I think, a good direction to go, and I hope to see the polls bear that out.
Mm-hmm.
That'll be really one of the key things to watch on August 2nd. That's for sure. But of course, we can't miss not talking about Michigan. Michigan is just a crap show. In all honesty, to be fair to Republicans, it seems like for the most part in most of the key congressional swing seats, other than the 3rd district where we're doing stupid things there with Peter Meyer, it seems like Republicans have their nominees in most of these swing seats. Tom Barrett against Alyssa Slotkin in the new Lansing-based seat. Paul Judge against Dan Kildee in the new kind of Saginaw, Midland Bay Area, Flint seat. And then John James in the new 10th district that was drawn to be a Trump district. So those will kind of, congressional primaries, not really ones to watch. Gubernatorial primary will be interesting to watch. It does seem like Tudor Dixon is pulling away. The rumors continue to be that Trump, if he endorses a candidate, will endorse Tudor Dixon. She's the best of the rest, is the best way to put it, because of Craig and James Craig and Perry Johnson being forced off the ballot because their campaigns committed signature fraud. So the Michigan Republican Party, everyone, Do
we want to actually talk though? I think we talk a lot about the governor race. I want to talk a little about the Michigan the primary between Haley Stevens and Levin.
Andy Levin.
What's there
I was
to
going
talk
to
about?
mention that.
There's not. It doesn't seem like there's much to talk about. After the most recent poll, I think we're gonna have. It's gonna be. It's the first time we're not gonna have 11 representing Michigan in some way, whether that be in the Senate or Congress since 1979.
I just find the actual campaigning of this to be interesting. The focus of the issues, the potential residency issue for Haley Stevens, among other things, could shake that race up. But I find it really interesting how this race is focused. I mean, Dylan could probably say otherwise. Is that aside from like one issue, these two are very, very similar. They disagree on barely anything. And despite this has been a very, very bloody and aggressive, mean-spirited primary, it looks like Stevens has a decisive advantage here. But it has been one of the more bloody, mean-tempered primaries of the cycle, I think.
Yeah, look, I think there are substantive differences between them, but it's not the difference between Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. It's fairly center left versus very left. Andy Levin, I think, moderated for his district. I think he is more left wing than his previous district would have led us to believe. But I mean, it's really hard, like I was saying about the Maryland 4th or Maryland 6th, Glenn Ivey and Don Edwards.
Maryland 4th, my friend, right? Maryland 4th.
Thank you. It's very similar to that. It's really hard to overcome that amount of spending. Andy Levin has had some funding in his favor, but not nearly enough. I think he's getting outspent like 3 or 4 to 1. Now he's spending a lot of money and raising a lot of money, but it's not going to be enough. And this district is a lot of Haley Stevens' district. Levin lives in the district, so that's why he ran here, but it is mostly Haley Stevens' district. So I know some people thought that Andy Levin was the favorite. I certainly didn't think it was going to be a 21-point advantage for Haley Stevens, but I did think she was a narrow favorite.
Yeah, she's and it's worth adding here that Stevens is very much an Obama alum favorite. The Obama crowd really loves Haley Stevens. They are big.
She worked on the auto bailout.
Yep. They like
I had to read about that for one of my classes this past
semester. But I also don't think that this is the end of the Levin family representing Michigan. I think Andy Levin will run for another seat at some point.
I could see him. I believe, does he have a law degree? Because I could. That's a guy I could see running to replace Nessel in 2026.
I am checking. I was even thinking he could run for Senate.
No, I don't think he would win a primary in a Senate race.
I don't know. I'm checking to see if he has a law degree.
And I think I do want to go back to what you mentioned earlier, saying he moderated for the district. That's a pretty astute observation. This district was only a Clinton plus 8 seat in 2016. It's never been ultra competitive, but it's within those realm of seats where you don't want to be aggressively left wing. Like it's not like Betty McCollum seat. Betty McCollum seat, you can afford to do that there. You can afford to do that in the Detroit seats. You can afford to even do that to an extent in maybe suburban seats in Illinois. There was some risk for a long time about those suburbs in Oakland County being a little bit iffy on left-wing candidates.
Andy Levin pulls a Mondaire Jones and carpetbags to Betty McCollum's district after she retires.
Just moves to another state entirely.
Yeah, pull a Mondaire Jones. Do it.
Yeah. But again,
we'll see what Levin does. I mean, he's young enough in which he's not done yet. I think that's clear.
Yeah, he's only.
But I find it very hard to believe that he's going to be the nominee unless we've seen some massive polling error, which has happened in Michigan on the Democratic side. To be fair, in recent years, it has. We should not just look over that. But
can I just say I'm also surprised that the Congressional Progressive Caucus has not come in more for Levin. He's their deputy whip.
Really?
Yeah, he's the deputy whip for the Congressional Progressive Caucus, and they've hardly come in at all for him, from what I can tell.
That seems weird.
It's very odd. I feel like they might have spent all of their money boosting Summer Lee.
That does feel weird. But yeah, that's really Michigan. Missouri, we'll go over the last two quick. Missouri and Washington. Missouri, obviously the key one, the Republican primary for Senate. Roy Blunt retiring. Eric Greitens seemed to have a narrow lead there. It does seem like the current Attorney General, Eric Schmidt, has overtaken him in recent weeks. Waiting to see if Trump makes a call there. The rumor seems to be trending more to that he is not going to make an endorsement over him endorsing anyone from what I've heard. Again, this is one of these weird things here where Trump is waiting a uniquely long time. This was something that was kind of reported on, that he is not making kind of the mistakes that not only in Arizona, theoretically, if Kari Lake loses, but also almost in Pennsylvania, Georgia, obviously the big one. He has clearly, we are seeing the effects of this. He is taking his time with deciding to endorse in some of these other key races here.
And to be clear, he doesn't just have Greitens is basically aggressively run for the Trump endorsement. The problem is Greitens faces very credible accusations of spousal abuse and child abuse.
And sexual assault.
Yeah, sexual assault. Like
all of the bad things other than like murder. And I don't think he's been accused of rape. Has he been accused of rape?
He's been accused of sexual misconduct or sexual assault.
I wouldn't be surprised if there was a rape accusation.
I wouldn't be surprised either, seeing what we've gotten from him so far. But I don't believe it. Other than like the worst of the worst, which again is murder and rape, he has basically been accused of any other like sexual assault or abuse, like domestic abuse crime that you could.
Yeah, Eric Greitens, bad guy. Bad guy.
Yeah, and to be clear, Trump has praised Greitens in public and private. This has come out abundantly clear in a bunch of sources coming out in private. He has very grave concerns about endorsing Greitens because of those issues and because he doesn't think Greitens could win with those issues.
He would win, unfortunately.
He very well could win. But
and Schmidt, also, I'm sorry, also the ad that he ran.
That was so disturbing.
Yeah. Like,
well, I mean, to be clear, the guy is a former Democrat. He has no affinity for his fellow Republicans. You don't expect him to come up for shooting them, though.
No, bad guy should not be on the ballot. Trump should.
Thankfully, the walls appear to be closing in. He's been an extended amount of time yesterday, I believe, in multiple hours, being deposed about the allegations. Polling has really taken a hit for him.
Has it? We haven't seen any polling.
There have been polls that have come out since.
Other than the one that had him tied for first with Schmidt?
Let me look up. There have been other polls. Yeah, the most recent polls. Looking up the list here. Terrence Group had him up. Had him in third place. Trafalgar had a tie between him and Hartzler. That seems really unlikely. But yeah, the Terrence Group was, I think, the most recent poll, perhaps.
Oh, that's good. American Loyalist in the comments says it's very likely Hawley would have him expelled if he wins. Yeah, I would not be surprised.
Yeah, to be clear, Hawley hates Eric Greitens. If there is one thing Josh Hawley does right, it is his aggressive and purposeful disdain and loathing at every portion of his being for Eric Greitens.
Might be the only thing.
He investigated Eric Greitens when he was the Attorney General. He got him to resign. And now Eric Greitens is coming back and going after his endorsed nominee, Vicky Hartzler, who is not going to be the nominee. He is very, very mad. Let's just put it lightly. He is not a fan of Eric Greitens.
Yeah, might be the only thing Josh Hawley's ever done right in his Senate career is go against Eric Greitens.
Yeah, it's the worst guy in the world meme.
For Democrats,
heartbreaking. The worst person in the world says that's a good point. And then Washington. Let's go to Washington. Yeah, because I think
Washington. We're watching. If we even stay up till that late on the second.
I won't.
I know you won't, Dylan. Maybe me and Erica will, and maybe Jake Walters too. But August 2nd, Washington 8th, we're watching the GOP primary there, the all-purpose primary there, see the Republican nominee against Kim Schreier. We're also watching to see if Jamie Herrera-Buehler and Dan Newhouse make the second round as the Republican nominee or as a Republican candidate in their races. Obviously, those are two Washington area Congress congresswomen and congressmen respectively who voted to impeach President Trump. See how that works. Newhouse has been kind of able to fly under the radar. The main candidate was Lauren Culp. He hasn't done too hot. There's kind of this other right-wing candidate who people think could overtake Newhouse, but Herrera Buehler, of course. Obviously, Joe Kent has kind of been the big name there. Kent's kind of floundered, though, since he did gain the Trump endorsement, but kind of since then he's relatively floundered with the buoy of a legit campaign. That's really it, then.
Yeah, Kent, to be clear, another weird dude, another entirely weird Trump endorsement. This is a guy who is extremely populist. He would be the most populist member of Congress in pretty much every sense. He's aggressively anti-immigration. Has some very weird affiliations. He is, in particular, has potentially worked with, I believe it was the Grapers and Nick Fuentes behind the scenes before disowning them. He has some problems. He has some severe problems, and that could be a problem in a district as competitive as Jamie Herrera. Let's be clear, it's not an extremely competitive district, but it is a close district. It's not one that we would expect to flip if Herrera Buehler is the nominee. It's also quite possible, but we would be, the other candidate I think is Heidi St. Clair. Mm-hmm. She has been running pretty aggressively against Joe Kent specifically. She's called him Portland Joe, the Bernie bro, in particular, which is a pretty amusing advertisement. But her campaign is also kind of a joke as well. So, we'll see how this goes. Washington does have their top 2 primary, which I really don't like. Could lead to some interesting results, but we'll see it on election night potentially, depending on how best they count their ballots.
Eric, top 2 or top 5?
Let's not go there.
We should have talked about the top 5. That's the dumbest proposal I've ever heard. Top 5 with none of these candidates also as an option, and those votes not counting, period.
None of the above is going to win a majority, y'all. It's going to be great.
Good Lord. We'll talk about that next week because that's just such a dumb system concept. Like, what's it going to be next? Top 6? Top 12? Top 19? I mean, come on.
Voting.
Yes, approval. Well, just... Election reforms, please consider approval voting. It's so much less dumb. It's just so less dumb than this. But yes, I think with that, we've pretty much gone through our topics tonight. Again, thank you guys for watching. We appreciate all your support. Be sure to like and subscribe whatever platform you're at. And I know we're streaming on Twitch now as well. If you want to watch us on Twitch and subscribe there.
Game night is coming. Game night will be coming.
Yep. So we should announce this. Yeah, we're going to figure out a date, but we will be trying to make a regular monthly occurrence. Yeah, monthly mailbag game night. We'll be live on Twitch. We'll be playing a game, and we'll be answering all of your questions throughout the night. We'll be answering your questions throughout the night. We'll not be answering all of your questions, to be clear, but we will be answering your questions if you want to put those in. We're hoping it'll be some fun. We'll get a date for you guys soon. We got to figure it out internally, but we're excited about it.
Playing yet?
We have to decide that. I'd put Risk up on the table, but Civ 6 would be pretty fun.
We gotta do Risk because I don't know how I only got my MacBook Air here, so that do something.
Civ 6 would ravage. Civ 6 would ravage your MacBook.
Yeah, actually, I need to actually put a webcam on my computer because I don't have a webcam on there. If I wanted to do that, it's a good point. But yeah, we'll figure out a time for this. We'll get it. Though, figure we'd announce that. We're pretty excited about it. We think it'll be some fun. So think of your questions. We'll post our mailbag for it probably tomorrow for you to start asking some of your questions throughout the week. We'll, again, do our mailbag segment during this point, but we'll be doing these questions mainly during that monthly event. So we hope to see you all there. But yeah, thank you guys again. Like, subscribe, follow us on Twitter. Follow us at elections_daily on Twitter. We are on Facebook as well. Follow our website, elections-daily.com. Big things are coming. I can't say what they are. Big things are coming to Elections Daily, the website. We've got some pretty cool stuff we're hoping to announce in the next few weeks. So stay tuned. But yeah, we'll see you guys next week on our next episode of Elections Weekly. Hope you enjoyed and hope you have a great night.